Hello everyone, welcome back to the driving school. A little bit different now, we're using the new camera and this time we're going to look at consistency. Now obviously last time we looked at understeer and oversteer and I talked about that James May, Jackie Stewart conversation about being able to predict understeer, predict oversteer. Now of course if you're consistent you can predict that very well. So this is what we're going to look at in this episode, how consistency can actually improve yourself as a driver and then actually make you quicker. Because there's a little circle that happens in racing where you go quick but you're not consistent. You then try and bring that consistency in, you then get consistent at that speed. You then need to push the game up a little bit more, so you then go quicker, which then loses the consistency. You then try and get consistent at those speeds, and it's all about how to do that. It's this circle, it goes round, so you get quick, you then try and get consistent, you then try and get quick, consistent. It goes all the way around. So that is exactly what we're looking at. And you've seen in past streams and videos that I have used the cones before. In the track guides I pick out particular brake markers that you can use, and it's literally that. You know, if you brake at the exact same point every single time, you turn in, you accelerate at the exact same point, you're going to be consistent there, and you're going to see some very consistent lap times. If you start oversteering every single time, you can predict that oversteer, you can catch it. It all comes together very nicely. So without further ado, let's jump into consistency.
So first of all, let's talk about the driving line assist. Now we have driving line, we've got cone markers, and we've got corner indicators. Now obviously in GT5 I used to use the driving line because cone markers didn't exist. And one thing I did in Gran Turismo 5 was when the driving line was blue, obviously you're accelerating, it would then go red, meaning to brake. I would always brake 5 or 10 meters into that red line. So there's no issue with using these assists, okay? All the top players will use these assists if they get an advantage. Now there are some disadvantages to these as well, particularly the driving line. It's not necessarily the best racing line. It can be a little bit off-putting. So do keep that in mind when using these. Obviously in GT Sports, I've used the cone marker mostly. Now again, a lot of the top guys, very quick guys, will have used the cone marker at some point in order to get quick at a circuit very fast, because it indicates around about where you should brake in a given car. Sometimes it's slightly off, so it might be just before the cone or might just be after the cone. I of course used this throughout the FIA season last year. I don't use it now because at the World Finals they banned it. Obviously at the European Finals they didn't, so I was like, hey, I'll use it at the European Finals, I'll use it until it gets banned. Now there is obviously weaknesses to using the cone marker as well. So for example, some guys stop using it because the cones can be hit off by other players, and obviously that obliterates them, even though they can't see them, and then you can hit that cone and go flying while they just continue on as normal. So, you know, there are strengths and weaknesses to using these, and that is a very big weakness to using the cone markers. But on some circuits, like the custom ones, as you can see behind St. Quarte, it can be useful because they're not real tracks. You've got to learn them quickly, and there's not as many, things that you can use as reference points, so a cone suddenly becomes advantageous. First of all, let's have a look at the FIA season, because I want to show you an example of where I was using it, and it was actually quite bad that I was using it because of what happened at the end. So here we are in the Manufacturers' Cup Round 9 in the FIA Season 3, the big one, you know, the one that actually counted. And you can imagine that this was a very important round, because if I didn't get a good result here, the pug dream was over. And as you can see, I'm using cones there. I'm braking at exactly the point where the cones were, and I'm using the cones to the full advantage here. Now you're probably wondering, well maybe Tidge, you could use the brake markers on the right side, but remember, they don't move. The cones move, and depending on the car and where they're placed, and they are extremely helpful. Now I said I'm going to show you the bad reasons, but it's later on in the lap where you see the bad reasons. So as we come into here, again we've got cones there. We brake just before the cone this time because we're in a front wheel drive Peugeot RCZ, remember, so we're actually carrying a lot more speed than a lot of the other Group 4 cars. I'm not sure how the cones are placed, but I am assuming it's based on an average or on one Group 4 car. The RCZ being very quick. Watch again, we're braking just before the cones this time, but again that is our reference. And the cones here, as you can see, there's one in the middle of the road there. If that was actually on the apex, or, you know, been knocked into the racing line, it would send my car flying. Absolutely flying. So there's a disadvantage. but we're going to get to the main point in a second here. As we come around here, see Al's got a penalty up front. Cones there, you know, assisting us in every single way. As we come down here, you can see there, that's then sort of a reference point. We're going to have our braking marker here. As we come through here, just listen to this now. You can see cones have been knocked over. Who knocked my cones over? Too reliant on the cones on the last corner there. So, as you can hear, too reliant on the cones. So you can become too reliant on them. And if somebody knocks them over, somebody wipes them out, game over. Your reference point suddenly disappears. So, one reason to not use them is potentially because of that. But, as I say, I still use them now. You know, it can impact you, but in the grand scheme of it, if you're on a corner where cones aren't necessarily going to get hit, they don't normally get hit on that last corner where they were. So somebody obviously wiped out, which actually caused that issue. You then pick out different reference points, sort of brake markers on the right hand side, even barrier colour changes, anything like that, that is what you would use. So even there, in a very vital qualifying session, I am using cones. But, you know, you might not want to use cones because of those weaknesses. So let's have a look at some reference points you potentially can use. So here we are, a Brands Hatch in an Aston Martin Group 3 car, and here's a good example. There's the pit lane exit. Now, we're already on the brakes, so we're judging this distance based on this line, and the line that splits the pit exit with the racing line. We're using that to get an idea of our braking. We've also got brake boards on the left-hand side that we used. So, going up the hill, one thing we can look at here, we have a bridge. We also have the left-hand side, the change in colour on the barrier. I use all of these to my advantage. Potentially I brake later, I brake at the bridge. Potentially I brake earlier, I brake at the colour sign. Potentially I brake at the brake marker, you know, the one brake marker. There's loads of stuff here that I can use for Druids to get round it and brake consistently every single lap. It's why I like Brands Hatch. There's a lot of reference points you can use to really nail that perfect lap and nail it consistently as well. You got to remember that. It's all about consistency. As we now come in to Druids, we go through Druids. Absolutely not a problem. Now we come to Graham Hill. Now again, we've got slight green tint on the barrier on the right hand side where it changes. We have the one brake marker. We also have the curb. You can use the curb here to your advantage. Do I brake as I hit the curb? Do I brake just before the curb? Do I brake at the one? There's so many different references you can use on a circuit that you can make a lap consistent. And you go in, Tidge, why are you explaining all this? As we're just going to go in slow motion now, and I'll just pinpoint a few little extras out there as well. Because it isn't even just braking, accelerating as well. You can look for an ambulance, look for a tree, look for anything you like as an acceleration point to accelerate out of a corner. Here, again, we've got brake markers, changing colours of the barriers, etc. Potentially you might look for a turn-in point as well. But why am I telling you this? Why am I doing this? Well, if you brake at the same point every single lap consistently over and over and over and over again, your braking into that corner should be the exact same thing. Potentially the car might start to oversteer, so you start to add a little bit of throttle. But again, you're braking at the same point. You're predicting that oversteer then, because every single lap, again, the oversteer comes in, you know where to brake. Coming up to here, we go, changing colours. Changing colour on the right side. Left and right sides there, later and earlier. You've got so many reference points at Brands Hatch, it's crazy. And this is at every circuit as well, there's loads. Even if it's just a tree or an ambulance at St. Croix, which actually happens. And over again on the left hand side, changing colour of the barrier. That's our turning point as well. We're going to use that to judge distance. As we come through here, obviously going down and up Dingle Dell, we're going to have the brake markers on the right hand side. Potentially no barrier changes this time, but we know if we brake around the one area, as we do there, right bang on the one, we can then turn in at the same time and get through that corner. As we now come to this left-hander, we're looking at the tree shadow. You can use shadows. We've got the marshals there. There's loads of references. It's unbelievable. And I'm explaining these to you because if you use references for every single part of your lap, you will get consistent very, very, very quickly, and then you can start adjusting and start working on your muscle memory, which is the next topic we're going to look at. Again, look, changing tarmac. We have the Indy circuit meeting the GP circuit there. Again, a reference point. There's so many. So make sure you use reference points here to really improve your consistency, because once you start braking at the same point, accelerating at the same point, your lap times will be very, very, very close. So I'm going to show some examples at the end that I've tweeted out of consistency. But now let's just talk about muscle memory a little bit, because that's where it gets a little bit more difficult. So, we're going to go to a recent FIA event actually, and this was streamed literally the other day. We're in the FT1 at Bathurst. Bathurst, quite a technical circuit, but one thing I wanted to show you here is literally break mode references and then going into that muscle memory sort of factor that can happen. So first of all, simple, let's have a look at where we brake for this right-hander at the end of the straight. Boom, there we go. So just before the end of the tarmac on the left hand side where it joins with the main circuit, that is where we're braking. So in order to get muscle memory, you're going to have to brake in a very similar situation in order to start doing it. Now muscle memory is also where we did the accelerator there, where we balance the throttle and then exit accordingly. So let's go to the next lap along. Here we go. Accelerating again down the straight. Let's have a look on the left hand side at the brake marker when we come to it. Of course, we're going to brake in a similar sort of area. We do this automatically. Slight bit further this time. Last time we saw a little bit. This time a little bit further. And we're stopping exactly where we see the brake pedal hit as we are about to accelerate on. And again, look at the acceleration and brake inputs here. Balancing the throttle like we did last time. And then we accelerate through the corner. Again, no problem. Slightly faster this time, but no issues. So if you now look, we have 4 screens, 4 laps, all after each other. Now pay attention to all the brake and accelerator inputs, lots going on here on this screen, but you can quickly see that they all are very similar and the lines are very, very similar, which is what we're trying to get here. This is muscle memory. This is muscle memory in action, because each time I'm going through that corner, the very same situation is happening. My trail braking is very similar, my acceleration is very similar, maybe a few % off, but it's all the same. Now we're going to do side-by-side lap just to show this even more. We're going to make sure the laps level up at each of the sectors. Going through here, look at that. Balancing the throttle exactly the same time. So muscle memory you can't teach, it will just happen. It's something that subconsciously will happen. One thing I do potentially to do this is maybe do it laps when I'm tired, because subconsciously it goes in a little bit more. But I'll explain that in a little bit as we come towards this first sector. You may have seen on the right hand side screen we had a little bit of a wobble, which is why the Ghost is now ahead as we head towards the end of this sector. And again there you can see slight bit of an issue there. We've leveled up straight away. It's that close, we can level it up that quickly. So we're going to continue on now. Again, look at brakes and accelerators. We did that with the 4-way screen. Braking, trail brake, trail brake. So we're on the accelerator a little bit earlier on the right hand side, but in both situations we still did a very similar thing. We balanced the throttle and then we accelerated out the corner, and we are taking very similar lines. Look how close these lines are. It's literally identical. Coming it through here, we don't lift as much on the left hand side. Coming down the gears, second gear, the speeds are very similar. We took a slightly different line on the right hand side screen. Bathurst is a very complicated track to do this on, and you can see on the exit we've had slightly different results. Continuing on up the hill now, we're going to go into the same lines again here. Going through this right-hander. The one on the right is slightly further ahead at this point. We've had a better line on the right hand side. We're a tenth up in our time versus the one on the left. Coming down here though, same gears, changing gears, very similar times. Going through here, very similar line again. Off the throttle on the left, we flatted it on the right, which is unbelievable to be honest. That's when you're in a good rhythm as well. Going over here, again, look at that, look at that. That was the perfect example there. Accelerators both drop to the exact same percentage and then go back up. That's how you take a corner perfectly with muscle memory. As we come to the end of this section, we'll line up the clips again. As you can see, the one on the left, just a slight bit faster than the one on the right. But if you look now, dropping the gears, exact same sort of time. We drop 2 on the left, get to the same point, exact same apex speed here, balancing the throttle, exactly the same point. Through there we go. It's unbelievable. Watching this side by side is unbelievable, even just to me. The throttle and brake inputs are so similar. This is muscle memory in action. Slight mistake on the left hand one there as we continue now into Devil's Elbow here. Braking. Let's look at the brakes. Trail braking exactly the same point. Just letting the car roll a little bit on the throttle. Getting the throttle a bit earlier on the left. Accelerate with the right all the same. My word. This is a close comparison. This is the perfect way to show consistency. The throttle and the brake are moving so similarly. If you can accomplish this on a lap by lap basis, you're going to get the consistency there. And then obviously if you get consistent, you can then start increasing the speed, as I said, because then, as you saw earlier on, you start increasing brake distances only slightly. Potentially you can then start increasing your lap times that I showed with the FT1 at Bathurst, where we were just going a little bit further each lap. So we're now going to, the clips are aligned now, I'll let them run on so they're equal as we accelerate now towards the chase. Well, this is the chase, the left-hander. Again, let's have a look at the brakes and the accelerators. As we're coming through here, it's a very similar line. Where do we brake? Exactly the same point. The gear changes are literally next to each other. How about that? The line's very similar coming through there. Just a bit tighter on the left-hand side of the screen. I mean, you can't get any closer than this, guys. This is the perfect show of consistency in terms of how the accelerator and how the brake are the same on a lap by lap basis. This is lap after lap. This is literally one after the other. You can see that with the top. We've got 1 minute 36 to entry, preparing to match on the right hand side. You know it's lap by lap. So as I was saying before, one way you can kind of learn this sort of thing is do laps when you're tired. Obviously I work a lot in the week. So sometimes I'll practice on a lap. It won't be my fastest lap, but because I'm doing lap after lap after lap, the muscle, your brain just starts to memorize the pattern, muscle memory, and then if you come to it on the next day, so like on a Saturday, after a Friday night of being tired, you just instantly go quick. I found that with this combo in particular. I was very tired Friday night. Saturday, jumped on, wow, I was fast, instantly on it. Similar situation. So there are some things to take away from this really in terms of consistency. The two main areas. Use track references, brake markers where you can, acceleration markers, turning markers, whatever you can to use to get that consistency. Try it. As here you see some of the Twitter stuff that I've posted. Look at the times there: 207.450, 207.451, 207.462. I mean, look at those 3 laps. Look at those 3 laps. That is mental, absolutely mental. 2 minute laps as well. Remember that, 2 minute laps. And again into Lagos here. Look at that. That is literally lap after lap after lap after lap after lap. You know, all those laps, 0.9 and a 0.8. Consistency is key. I tweeted that. I always tweet all this kind of stuff because I think it's amazing. Consistency is one of my better strengths that I've got while racing. I can be very consistent when I need to be. But as I was saying, 2 main things I want you to take from this video. Use track markers, use brake markers, even use the cones if you have to. Use any form of markers that you can in order to improve your consistency. And then second of all, make sure you get that practice in. Muscle memory is critical. You saw that with a side-by-side lap comparison. If you get consistency right, it will improve tyre wear because you're not going to slide as much. It'll improve predictability. Because yes, if you start to lose the car a little bit, you'll know where the car is going to be loose because you're doing the same thing lap after lap after lap. So you'll know where the car might get a little bit loose. You can catch it and be prepared to catch it. As I was saying in the previous episode, James Mays to Jackie Stewart conversation, you can be prepared for that. And obviously, with better tyre wear, with the fact that you can predict what the car's going to do, you will get better lap times and better race times because obviously, one extremely good lap is not as good as 100 good laps. Even though they might be slightly slower, they're more consistent. Overall in a race, consistency is key. You saw me tweet that. So that's it for this episode, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It's been a bit of an interesting one. I love the side-by-side comparison I did there. It just looks amazing. The consistency there. Oof. But obviously with consistency, we've then got to put that into practice in terms of qualifying pole position. So that is going to be the next episode, which is going to be episode number 7. See you then.